Hello and welcome to Folsom Field. I am Matt Smith. Thanks so much for tuning in. Much appreciated. Before we get rolling, like and subscribe. You know the drill. Black and Gold Day in the books. Coach Prime's third spring game here in Boulder is now done, as is his third spring football period. A new era for the Buffaloes. Even though Coach Prime didn't want to call it a new version, it certainly is. Tons of turnover on this roster and more will be coming. We got to see the debut of Juju Lewis in a Colorado uniform. Not the official debut, but certainly for Colorado fans. We also got to see Liberty transfer Caden Salter run the offense quite a bit. Today, I would say, was a bit of spring is tough to evaluate in general. I didn't love what I saw out there today. I think they're certainly capable of a better performance, but at the same time, you have to take some things with a grain of salt, considering really, 15 practices for the most part that these guys have been together as a cohesive unit, most of them, including all of the new players and your leadership. After the game, we got a chance to speak to both quarterbacks, Coach Prime, Jordan Seaton, and newly placed on scholarship, Ben Finiseth at safety. Interesting to talk to all those guys. And like I said, Coach Prime didn't really want to use the term, I think I said new version. He said, look, it's just the same. I don't know, argue semantics all you want. This is a new season and it is a new chapter, right, wrong, or indifferent for the Buffs. Clearly you'd like to want to make it seamless, but you watch the action out here on the field today. You don't have two. You don't have 12, and obviously a great day to be able to honor those two guys as they were on the field pregame to watch their jerseys get retired. Certainly that's a big topic of conversation. I've got plenty of thoughts on that. I'm gonna save those for a future video because I don't want it to get muddied down with the meat and potatoes of what we looked at today, certainly. But the overall takeaway from it is just an amazing opportunity to be able to honor two of the greatest players in program history, and they'll be there forever. So great to see for both Shedeur and Travis. What a pleasure it was to be able to watch, to be able to cover, and be just a tiny little part of that journey here the last couple of years as we await the NFL draft next Thursday, in which we anticipate both of those guys to go quite early in the first round. Third most attended spring game in Colorado history. I believe our buddy Brian Howell at the Daily Camera had that note. 20,500, clearly from last year, a step down. Coach Prime afterwards said he was a little disappointed with fan attendance. I understand that, certainly. It was the majority of this second section here, basically wrapped all the way around, was empty. 20,000 is pretty good when you put it in perspective of the entirety of this program. However, compared to the last 2 years and compared to the opportunity to come out for next to nothing to see Shedeur and Travis, go to work as well as the rest of these guys, you've got to get fans accustomed to new faces, right? And, certainly I would say that the draw that Shedeur and Travis brought, they don't have that on the team. And the other part of it is, they up ticket prices to $25. And I heard from many different CU fans that, hey man, I'm not paying $100 for a family of four to show up. And look, I get that, I understand times are tough right now. You certainly got to be watching, pennies, and that's a tough one on a Saturday, on a cold Saturday to swing for some folks. And I certainly understand that. Now, clearly, brand new contract for Coach Prime, updated NIL resources. Fans are certainly being asked to step up more and more and more. I would say next year, you've got to learn from that. That's just a little bit too much. At 10, 15, I think you cap it there and find the way to make money in different places, quite frankly. There are different places to do it. That's not the best. This is an opportunity for people to come out, and if they have to think about money at all, then you're doing it wrong. And especially for kids. So I think that was a little bit misguided, quite frankly. And the late announcement of the Shedeur and Travis jersey retirement, I think, was also a bit of a misstep. Probably should have had that one out earlier. Again, we'll talk about that situation entirely, but like I mentioned, a great opportunity to honor those two guys. So let's talk about what we saw on the field today. Juju Lewis came out with the first team offense. I think that was more because, hey, he's 17. Let's get him kind of going with more guys who know what they're doing, are experienced. So he he doesn't have to spend too much time getting his ducks in a row. Caden Salter was out there 11 on 11. Ryan Staub did not get a turn 11 on 11. And based upon the performance of both of the aforementioned quarterbacks, I thought it might be a good idea to get Staub a look, but they didn't. They know what they have in Ryan. This is his third year in the program. So while I would like to tell you that I think this is a wide open quarterback competition, I think we've all understood that it's basically Salter and Lewis going head to head. Otherwise, you would have given Ryan Staub at least a series 11 on 11 today. That being said, early on, Juju looked every bit 17 years old, definitely some nerves going on. I think there were 2 sacks in the first 5 snaps, including a self-sack. He just wasn't all that sharp overall today, and it's not something that I necessarily expected from him. You can tell, though, he's wickedly talented, and hopefully that development continues to keep coming, but he's got a long ways to go. And I think if you asked anybody inside of that building, they would agree with that, and it was represented here on the field today. I did think probably offensively he had the best pass of the day. Nice little RPO fake, a post to Quentin Gibson, hit him for a touchdown. That was probably their best offensive play in general. What we talked about with Pat Shurmur when we talked about this quarterback competition is having 2 different styles of quarterbacks. And because Caden is that dual threat guy where he can use his legs and get out of the pocket, without quarterbacks being live, it's tough to really get a full grip of what he's capable of. But through the air, I didn't think he looked very sharp, quite frankly. And I know there's some time that needs to go by with a summer full of reps between both this brand new receiver group and these 2 quarterbacks. But maybe just not as sharp as I would have hoped, quite frankly, from Salter. But what you did see was the comfortability in that RPO offense. And we'll get into some of my takeaways as far as that offense goes. I'm confused just slightly about the approach, because there are 2 different offensive styles, right, with Juju and with Caden. However, if you're going to lean into the RPO, which I think it's obvious based on today, with all due respect to Juju, Caden should be further along at this point, and he is. And personnel-wise, I'm not exactly sure Colorado has what they need to build upon his strengths and to maximize what he does well, which is something that we talked with Coach Prime about afterwards, how Colorado really has to figure out these strengths of the quarterbacks, right, of these 2 quarterbacks, and be able to modify and build offenses around them. Well, I think personnel-wise, if you're going to go RPO, you do need to lean into more of the misdirection than they're leaning into right now. That's what you see at a program like a Kansas, a BYU, even a Kansas State. They utilize that misdirection, and they keep a defense on their heels by making sure that what they're doing isn't easy to figure out pre-snap. And I think Colorado might struggle with that unless they address some personnel areas, which we talked to Coach Prime afterwards, and he definitely gave us his offseason priority list. But what's really missing in this offense is a halfback, fullback, a guy like a James Casey from Kansas last year, somebody you can move around, maybe line up at tight end, line up in the backfield, cut him out wide, a willing blocker. We talked to Pat Shurmur the other day, and he said that he prefers his tight ends be receivers over blockers, which I think you definitely want versatility. But if you're going to lean into the RPO, you've got to be sleight of hand. Am I going this way? Am I going this way? Here's a pullout. And I can utilize different guys and have a Swiss Army knife out there that can make a pass look, actually be a run, but look like a pass. And I think with Savell Smalls and with Zach Adkins, Coach Prime said the tight ends were right? I believe Savell Smalls might have gotten injured after this one, but that's a converted defensive end, and he was basically their only tight end they could actually use last year to go 11 personnel. But the team that I'm seeing on the field is going to need to be in 12 personnel in some different situations, and I just don't think they're going to be as dynamic through the air, certainly. I mean, that's the understatement of the century. It's also probably unfair when you're just coming down off of watching Shedeur and what he can do with the football. But the truth is that I see potential problems popping up if they don't find a way to bring in some guys who are a little bit more versatile than they have. Because I think it's pretty clear, whether it's Juju or whether it's Caden, they may be different stylistically in the fact that Caden wants to run the ball a little bit more, but the base of what you're doing is going to be more or less the same. It is an RPO heavy system. And as a result, I think to help those guys out, you need some stronger edges than exist on this team. Afterwards, Coach Prime talked about one tight end and what do you talk about, a couple of backs? Well, I think they need a fullback-ish on this team, a guy who can do a little bit of everything and again, just add to the wrinkles that you can rip off in this offense. Because if you're going to go RPO, you got to go misdirection. You do. I mean, to maximize that style, you have to be able to be versatile, and I just don't think they're there yet with their personnel, but we'll see what happens. Spring portal open Wednesday, and we'll see who they bring in. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, that stuff will probably fill itself out. I don't imagine we'll have too many stragglers, even past a month, but next couple of weeks will be big. Let's see. It'll be a nickel and dime offense, right? Quick throws, middle of the field, into the flat, so it's great to have those skill positions, but both of these quarterbacks, I thought today, struggled to get the ball outside the numbers and to set up and allow even to get through their progressions. They got a ways to go. And certainly, again, when the last person that you're used to seeing is Shedeur, who can get through progressions, who knows, what's expected of him, who knows the standard, who knows what they're going for, and for all intents and purposes, is the quasi-offensive coordinator on the field, it's going to be a big transition. So a lot is on Pat Shurmur's shoulders this summer to develop an offensive game plan that is dangerous. And I'm not sure they're going to have the verticality in their game that they had last year. And I think to move forward, assuming that's just going to be the case because, hey, this is Colorado, this is our system, this is what we want to do, I think that's a fool's errand because you're going to end up in trouble without another, plan B, without different avenues to attack. So I really do hope there's some thought there this summer on just their approach in that regard, and it's probably got to be pretty soon here because, like I said, they're going to start making some additions. Coach Prime talked about his offseason priorities, and he said, look, we got about half of those guys already, and I'll go through the list of specifically what they need. He talked about a game-breaking defensive tackle. He talked about a linebacker. He talked about 2 safeties, talked about 3 corners, a tight end, guard, tackle, 2 centers. So I think that's a good list. Running back, I imagine they probably already have names or at least contacted, potential candidates there. He didn't really bring that up with a lot of emphasis, so I'm thinking that in his head that's probably already done, which is important because, again, if you're going to be RPO, you got to be able to run the hell out of the football. And he brought that up the other day just the same, that, this year they're going to run a ball. And I think it's also going to be slightly out of necessity that they're going to have to do that too, because I don't believe their offense is going to be as dynamic through the air. We talked with Brian Howell the other day, kind of sent some text, and even Brian brought up to me, what was it, runs, handoffs to running backs were, I want to say, about 27%. That's probably going to be up closer to 40 this year with what they're working with. Again, I just thought the quarterbacks today struggled to get the ball outside, but again, you don't want to read too much into one spring game, but it's kind of a culmination of some of what I've seen off of well-off, and again, you only see a small portion, and I don't want to make too many grand assumptions based upon a very small sample size of what I've been able to see, but I think I'm pretty safe in feeling that way. Just myself, I feel pretty comfortable in saying a lot of that. Probably upset some of you. You'll get in the comments. You'll tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. Let's see. Juju, I think overall has some really elite skills. It's just going to take some time. I didn't expect him to be the starter day one, and I don't expect him to be the starter in the fall. But I think it's good that he and Salter are pushing each other right now, because I don't think either one of them has a firm hold of the job, even though it's clear to me that Caden is the more polished player at this stage. He's got to be more consistent as well as he continues to learn. And again, this is the first several weeks with everybody being together. It shouldn't be a finished product yet, and it probably, coming off of last year, should be maybe just a little bit of a disappointment, only because, look, I mean, that speaks to the talent that they had on this team last year. It was good to see Juju bounce back in their second 11-on-11 session. Caden Salter, I think he's got some ability to extend plays with his feet and to extend drives. Third downs, a lot of it's going to be on him. Their first drive was a little sloppy. Nice pass to Zach Atkins. They end up kind of chipping away down the field, but you just got to make sure that there's more to you right, than that 5 to 10 yard game, because you're going to have to be able to take advantage of defenses down the field, and hopefully as they progress with more continuity and more reps, they eventually build that comfortability factor where they're not fearful in taking shots. And I didn't expect to see a bunch of shots. I did think we might see a few more of them than we ended up seeing. Coach Prime said there were some busted plays overall, and since we couldn't hear in the headset, he could hear, and he hadn't had a chance to watch the film, obviously. But all that stuff will get cleaned up, and we'll see how it looks when they regather for fall here. Let's see. Yeah, I found it very interesting because not only are you kind of redoing the way that you're going to approach offensively, you're also working in some new pieces defensively, but the leadership on this team, I think, needs to continue to develop organically, clearly. But I was curious to know after spring ball what we might see. Who are those guys that are going to step up in every position room? And we got a chance to speak with Jordan Seaton, and clearly Jordan considers himself among the leaders of this team, which has been echoed by basically everybody else that we've talked to all spring ball, that Jordan Seaton has really begun to assert himself vocally and holding teammates accountable, which is important because at 19, it's not really that easy to do, especially when you're talking about holding grad transfers and guys who may be, in some cases, even 3, even maybe 4 years older than you, or even a younger guy. But it's important to have those voices because Cam's gone, Shiloh's gone, right? Your primary sources of leadership aren't there anymore, so those are vacant spots that Colorado really needs different players to step up and assert themselves. Seaton talked about Zy Chrysler being one of those guys. Offensive line transfer from Illinois, very consistent. He actually mentioned him as maybe one of the biggest offensive leaders, which I think would be a good thing. If you can generate that leadership from both Seaton and Chrysler, I think it gives you some promise into next year that, hey, look, they actually might have an offensive line that can set the tone, that can come out, and that can impose their will, because the fact of the matter is they haven't had that either the first 2 years. And when you have leadership at different positions, I think that's when you can have a more mature and certainly a more polished group at the end of the day. Adding Monetaimani in there, right? They just brought in Hill from Memphis, via the portal. So we'll see what that group looks like, and I imagine it'll change more. Coach Prime talked about they want 2 centers. Sounds to me like they don't have their starting center on the roster, and I think you're going to end up seeing that in multiple different positions that day one starters might not already be on this roster, because I just don't think there's been enough guys that have gone out there and at least this soon after the bowl game asserted themselves. In the past, it might be a little bit different. You may have seen a little bit more progress between end of season and start of spring ball, but since this team had practices well into December and had a bowl game in the final week of December, it really hasn't been that long that's kind of a time period that's elapsed since we've been able to watch these guys. So I wouldn't say huge progress has been made, but I would say some has by some of these role players, maybe last year, backups last year, that are now going to be counted upon moving forward. So Zy Chrysler, Jordan Seaton leaders, and then Jordan also pointed to Arden Walker and Ben Finiseth. We have heard much of the same from many different sources this spring ball, that Arden has really stepped up and, being a Colorado guy, being a legacy buff, has really taken pride in what it means to wear that Colorado jersey. Made some plays today. I believe he had a sack in the first series of the game. Arden is a guy I expect to have a very strong season. He's going to play a lot. Last year, he really helped them turn around what they did, not just pass rush wise, but in the run game. And that started at UCF with the way they were able to contain KJ Jefferson. And I expect more of that to continue. The most encouraging part of today was Colorado's defense to me. There is plenty of continuity. Now, you're going to need some better depth in some areas and probably some better starters, in my opinion, at linebacker. But I thought Martavius French had a nice day. Tawfiq Bayard had a nice day. 2 transfers. Then you look up front in that defensive line, and you do have a lot of returners, and that's a group where I expect development to have taken place, right? Because Anquin Barnes, you got Tawfiq Thomas, bringing in Jaheim Otis. There's a bunch of different guys on this team that could step up and play a big role when you're talking about the interior of that line. And when we talk about momentum from last year to this year, run defense is one area that I'm looking at for them to really continue what they built last year, because it improved so significantly over 23, and you do have a lot of those guys left. Now, maybe you don't have an Nwankwo, maybe you don't have a Cokes here, but what you do have are some big space eaters, and I think with that revamped, defensive line room with Hilo in there and now bringing in Domata Peko, I don't expect those guys to miss much of a beat either. I do like what I've seen out of some of these secondary positions, but I don't know how happy overall Coach Prime is with some of that stuff. We didn't see Preston Hodge this spring. We didn't see Colton Hood. We didn't see Keaton Wade. We didn't see Samuel Okunlola. So do understand that a lot of what you saw out there is not what it's going to be rolling into the fall. And we've seen that, good examples of that, the last couple of years, right? Nakai Hill-Green wasn't in this program last year until after spring ball. Well, I expect Coach Prime to go bring in some difference makers in this spring portal window. Now that the extension, the ink is dry, according to Coach Prime, he took care of making sure that they had more resources at their disposal in the collective with NIL. So with all of that now, with a revamped coaching staff, bringing in Marshall Falk, right, bringing in Peko, bringing in some more NFL experience, and a couple of names in the coaching staff that might not get released till maybe this summer at some point or this fall. But look, there are some really impressive position rooms from a coaching perspective on this team right now. And if you're in that transfer portal and you got 1, maybe 2 years left and you're like, man, NFL is my dream and that's what you're most focused on, I don't know why you wouldn't want to come here, because opportunity exists almost all up and down this roster right now if you're a true difference maker. And I feel pretty comfortable with some of the things that I said last week on the latest episode of my podcast with Brian. I guess it would have been Monday. And again, check for Monday on Brian's channel. But, this team's got a ways to go. They've got a ways to go, and certainly getting some of those guys back will help. But what I see out here is a team that will be led by its defense most of the year, and that will need to play well defensively to win games. I don't think they're going to be as potent of an offense as they were last year. They're not missing a ton of pieces offensively. Defensively, they are. Offensively, I'm seeing a team that is struggling with maybe a little bit of an identity crisis because they're missing some personnel, and certainly only because they haven't had enough repetition to develop all of that yet. So again, I don't want to overreact, and assuredly some of you don't understand holding the standard and sharing concerns to be that this is going to be a one-win team. That has nothing to do with it, right? These are situations that you have to rectify if you want to continue to uphold the standard, in my opinion. And look, I think if you got them in a private moment, they would agree. There's a reason why Coach Prime's wish list is long. It's long, okay? Normally, if you finished a spring ball or pre-portal era or pre-2023, if you finished a spring ball needing a tackle, linebacker, a defensive tackle, linebacker, 2 safety, 3 corner, tight end, guard, tackle, 2 centers, you're like, but now with the transfer portal, you do have an opportunity to go out and correct some of those things. And if Colorado wants to compete in the Big 12 Conference, I'd say they really need to figure out who they want to be offensively and ask themselves, do we have the personnel to make that happen? I respect Coach Prime saying, look, it's not a new version of the Buffs when I asked him about it. It's just continuing. It's a new chapter, whatever you want to call it. We can argue semantics all day. It is a new chapter. And moving forward, they will do things differently. So it is important to understand that some of those changes need to happen, and they know that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do in the portal, because they have proved that they can get talent in here. They just, again, are going to have to go out there and do it again, as it's a what have you done for me lately world in the recruiting cycles. And you have to consistently be able to pull to be deemed a successful program, and most likely to have success, because everything is, at least in the current moment, so volatile and things turn over so quick, right? We saw Isaiah Augustive jump in the portal. We saw Tajay McCoy the other day jump in the portal. Cash Cleveland. There will be more following today. Coach Prime I think he made the speech to the guys yesterday, kind of being like, hey, anybody hitting the portal, raise your hand right now, because I know who's going and who's not. So I imagine we'll see some names, and there should be some names that hop in the portal, because there's definitely some guys in this roster that shouldn't be on this roster. And I would say that there's some talent out there in the portal, as there are, 10,000 names in the portal. It's insane the amount of players that jumped in the portal. And I read that I believe it's 65% of the players who've jumped in the portal the last few years have either not gotten a D1 scholarship or any scholarship. So, again, you jump in that portal, you better make sure you do have a plan. And one of the things that this staff is, great at is making sure they provide support even to players who do want to leave the program. And making sure that there are options for that player before they make a decision they might end up regretting, because there are some guys who have hit the portal the last couple of years from Colorado who never played ball again, and you don't want to end up being one of those guys. And I think they have done a really good job conveying that to their roster, that you need to reach out for support with how much is out there right now. If you don't have coaches advocating on your behalf, or at least helping you out, you're kind of behind the eight ball, unless you're one of these bigger names who's going to be courted by everybody. But that's not the case for every last player to jump in there. So all told, I'd say, I guess, a bit of an expected spring, that it was a little bit underwhelming overall, because again, I don't know how you come off of last year and, be super charged up unless you just really don't know what you're looking at. So I think they have plenty of work to be done here still, and I have full confidence that they're going to be able to land the positions that they need. I'm curious to see offensively what the approach ends up looking like by fall camp, and what they develop in fall, right? Because again, I think you've got to lean into that misdirection and that sleight of hand if you're going to go RPO, because that's how you're tough to defend against, right? I think about that Kansas game last year. Here's a tight end in the backfield. Oh, what's coming out here? It's the true. And even Caden talked about this, right? He's used to running the triple option, so he knows how to do it. You just have to assimilate that into the program. And one of the things that you can run into are discipline issues. And I would say today, you definitely don't want to see as many penalties in a spring game as we saw today. It was sloppy. It was sloppy is the truth. And, I would think that if you were to ask Coach Prime that, hey, look, we could be way better than what we showed today. And overall, I would say that it's not going to be easy to keep this thing at the 9-win level. Like, it's just not. Even in the Big 12 and the volatility that exists, we expected a bunch of teams to be really good last year who ended up really bad. Even in a conference that can be so up and down, you have to make sure that you are putting yourself in the best chance to have success, and not just assuming things are going to pick up, and being hyper vigilant to keep that going, because Texas Tech's spending more, right? I mean, we can go down the list of teams in this conference that are spending more and certainly loading up, and maybe in some situations have more returning talent than Colorado does. So stuff to clean up, but a productive spring to provide clarity, to provide a clearer path of what it's going to need to look like when this thing opens up in the fall. And again, another great day to honor Shedeur and Travis, and pretty cool that those 4 names are now joined with 2 more. And again, we'll have more thoughts on kind of I don't want to call it controversy, but the reaction, or I don't know, you call it whatever you want, the hysteria surrounding the jersey retirement. There's some stuff that we'll talk about here moving forward later. And again, if you're an avid watcher of the channel, just want to let you know how much I appreciate it. I've definitely been having some stuff going on here since pretty much last season ended in my personal life that I've needed to take care of. So maybe been a little bit lighter on the content than I would have liked to be in spring ball. But look, when certain things pop up, you got to make sure that you give them your full attention. And I've certainly had some things that I've needed to commit to fully. So again, I appreciate everybody for watching. Fun to talk to you all again. Make sure you get in the comments, like and subscribe. Oh, this is the last game at Folsom Field with grass. That's it. I'm on the turf right now. It's the last. Should I take some grass with me? I might pick a few blades. But shout out to my grounds crew who would come by back and forth each game, and just for good measure, while the grass is still on the field. We had to get some sort of distraction, right? And you know what? Take that. Little souvenir. Folsom Field. We'll see ya.